Hello, church family. Welcome to today's Sunday school lesson. We are in session 4. If you were looking for session 3 from last week, as I said this in the previous video. I forgot to record it last week, but I have recorded it just before I record it. I'm recording this one right now. So if you found session 4 and we're looking for session 3, it is on the YouTube channel. You can go there and watch it now, right now, as you're watching this one. The other one has already been uploaded. So, this is session 4 entitled Winning Strategy. And we are going to be in Joshua chapter 6, verses 12 through 25. And our key idea this week is God gave his people victory when they trusted and obeyed him. We're going to start off by asking the question, what is involved in learning to trust someone? We're actually dealing with this a little bit with as being parents. Parents of toddlers want to teach their children to trust them. Building this trust involves providing for their needs and protecting them. And this is so true. Right now, or just this past couple of weeks, anytime we were trying to take the bottle away from Tucker to burp him or to change positions or wipe spit up off his face or whatever, he'd get very upset for us taking away the bottle because he, in his mind, is probably thinking, I was eating that, and now that you've taken it away, I'm not going to get to eat that anymore. And if you give him the bottle back, he quiets right down. It was exactly what the problem was. We had taken away his food. Now, in the last several days or so, as he just turned 6 months old, we give him the bottle. He drinks most of the bottle, but we have to either, get boogers out of his nose because he's very stopped up right now, and I know that's gross, or burp him, or do all of the things that as responsible parents ought to do so that their kid isn't in any discomfort. But he has been very good and mild mannered about the bottle being taken away from him. This morning I fed him and I took the bottle and set it down, and Grace and I had a conversation, and he was just smiling and babbling along as I'm shifting him around and bouncing him, trying to get him to burp. And he's just not crying or fussing. He's just smiling and having a good time this morning. And that would not have been the case even 5 days ago, while when we started vacation, or while we had just gotten to Port Aransas last week. And a week ago or 2 weeks ago, forget about it. He was going to be having a meltdown for his bottle being taken away. Gotten better about it because we're building that trust where he knows that we're going to take care of him. We're going to make sure he gets fed. We're not going to be withholding food for longer than necessary, only as long as it is to burp him or wipe his mouth or whatever. So building this trust involves providing for their needs, protecting the kids. Some parents build trust by encouraging their child to leap off of something into their arms. The way my dad built my trust was jumping into a pool. I was terrified of getting water in my nose as a kid, water in my ears as a kid. And my dad just said, "Trust me, son. I'm going to catch you. I'm going to catch you every time until you tell me that you're ready for me to not catch you." And I I jumped and dad caught me, and I remember trusting him to catch me as long as he knew I was jumping in. There were a couple of times obviously where I tried to jump in and he wasn't ready and I went right to the bottom of the pool. When the child makes the jump and the parent catches them, both the parent and the child are exuberant. They laugh, they have fun. God often calls upon us as his children to trust him and make giant leaps of faith to demonstrate that they can always trust him as they obey him. So, what is involved in learning to trust someone? It is past experiences and learning whether or not they are trustworthy, if they are people of their word, uh, if God is faithful, and I believe that he is, and I know that he is, then we can trust him to catch us and get us through um, all situations. I just talked about this in the other video, but um, God has proven himself time and time again to me and to my family that he is going to be with us and he's going to provide for us. And so it would far be it from me to go, "Oh God, why is this happening to me?" And the example I gave is we have a car repair that is going to sooner rather than later. And it's not going to be cheap, it's going to be expensive, but we have the means to pay for it. and that is only because God is faithful to us. And so, because He has provided in the past, I had full confidence and full faith that He would provide for us now. So let's talk about today. Today we are going to be in Jericho, and the walls are going to come tumbling down. So about 700 years had passed between Abraham getting the covenant from God, where he was going to give this land, this promised land, to Abraham's offspring as their inheritance. And the Lord was about to fulfill that promise. So God determined that it was to be Jordan who would lead the people across the Jordan, and that it was going to be Joshua, it would be Joshua who would lead the people across the Jordan into the promised land to defeat the Canaanites and then settle into the land as the Lord had commanded them. So in Joshua 1, God promised Joshua that he would always be with him and give victory over Israel's enemies. In chapter 2, Joshua, remember, we read about 2 spies who were sent into Jericho on a reconnaissance mission. Sorry, I have something stuck in my throat. The spies came upon Rahab, and Rahab was faithful and was faithful to the spies and faithful to Israel, and so they are able to escape. And so now last week, or the last video, chapters 3 and 4, God exalts Joshua as his ordained leader over Israel and parted the floodwaters of the Jordan in front of Israel so that they could cross into Canaan. And in chapter 5, the men of Israel renewed the covenant with the Lord by being circumcised as he had commanded. They celebrated the Passover and ate from the bounty of the land of Canaan. And so, now in chapter 6, it recounts the dramatic and miraculous conquest of Jericho, the first major city in Canaan that the Israelites were going to face after crossing the Jordan River. So let's read this. If you know the song, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. That's what's about to happen. Verse 12. Joshua got up early the next morning. The priests took the ark of the Lord, and the 7 priests carrying 7 ram's horns marched in front of the ark of the Lord. While the ram's horns were blowing, the armed men went in front of them, and the rear guard went behind the ark of the Lord. On the second day, they marched around the city once and returned to camp. They did this for 6 days. Early on the 7th day, they started at dawn and marched around the city 7 times in the same way. That was the only day that they marched around the city 7 times. After the 7th time, the priests blew the ram's horns, and Joshua said to the troops, "Shout, for the Lord has given you this city. But the city and everything in it are set apart to the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab the prostitute and everyone with her in her house will live, because she hid the messengers that we sent, the spies that we sent. But keep yourselves from the things set apart, or you will be set apart for destruction. If you take any of those things, you will set apart the camp of Israel for destruction and make trouble for it. For all the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are dedicated to the Lord and must go into the Lord's treasury." Meaning, all of the riches, all the spoils of war from this city, going into the temple, going into the tabernacle, into the treasury of the Lord. The people are not to make themselves wealthy off of it. So the troops shouted, and the ram's horns sounded. When they heard the blast of the ram's horns, the troops gave a great shout. What happened to the wall? It collapsed. The troops advanced into the city, and each man straight ahead, and they captured the city. They completely destroyed everything in the city with the sword. Every man, woman, both young and old, every ox, sheep, and donkey. Joshua said to the 2 men who had scouted the land, "Go to the prostitute's house and bring the woman out of there, and all who are with her, just as you swore to her." So the young men who had scouted went in and brought out Rahab and her father, mother, brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her whole family and settled them outside the camp of Israel. They burned the city and everything in it, but they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. However, Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute, her father's family, and all who belonged to her, because she hid the messengers Joshua had sent to spy on Jericho, and she still lives in Israel today. Now, obviously, living in Israel today, that's referring to that this book was written to the people of Israel. That means that she grew old living with the Israelites, being a part of the nation of Israel. So we have four sections here. We're going to start with instructions obeyed. So Joshua got up early the next morning. Well, what happened the morning before? Well, the day before, God had given Joshua and the people specific instructions about capturing Jericho. He told them, march around it for 6 days. March around once and blow the ram's horns. March with the soldiers in the front and the rear guard behind, and blow the horn once. On the second day, do the same thing. Do it for 6 days. And then on the seventh day, do it 7 times. And then give the people, after the 7th time, have the people give a loud shout, and the walls will come down and the city will be yours. So they had the instructions obeyed. They had the instructions. Now it's time to obey the instructions. So the 7 priests carrying the ram's horns, which are known as shofars, these are literally horns of a ram that have been hollowed out and a mouthpiece cut into or put on, that the priest could blow, and it would sound a kind of a musical note, a loud note for sure, and it would be unmistakable as a sign of war in this time. I mean, armies used it to try to frighten the other armies and the people that they were going to be conquering. So, so they marched in front of the Ark of the Covenant, which was a reminder of God's presence to Israel. So on the second day, they marched around the city once and returned to camp. They did this for 6 days. So these instructions, they seem a little, what's the word? Unorthodox, I think is the best word. If you're a soldier and if you are a man of war, you are expecting to just run in, you have a battering ram, you try to take down the main city gate or the main city door or wall, whatever the point of ingress is to the city, point of egress, ingress, I don't know, point of entry. But they are, you would think that you would try to breach the wall or the gates somehow to get inside. And so marching doesn't really do anything. I mean, marching is used as kind of a posturing to show your force, show your strength, to have people lined up to intimidate the other army and the other forces. And so as soldier, you might be questioning what is actually happening, especially when you do it for a full week. But then finally, because of their faithfulness, they did this on the 7th day, and we're going to see that it comes down. Have you ever been given an instruction or a command that did not make sense in the moment? I know I have. I can't think of any right now, but I am always one who, I never mean to question authority. It's never my intention. I'm never going, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, or, he doesn't know why. I don't know why he's telling us to do this. It's never going to work. I just want to know why. I want to know why we're doing something. I want to know why we do it this way, because I just want to understand. It's never meant to be a disrespectful thing. I just want to know. But sometimes it's not for me to know, and I have to be okay with that. Well, God gave them these instructions without telling them the exact method by which they would be conquering the city. But it didn't make sense. But if you trust and you see the plan through, you might see what the orchestrator had in mind. And so sometimes God gives us unusual instructions. Sometimes he says, don't save your money, give it to the poor. Sometimes he says, don't buy this, instead buy this other thing, and I'll provide a vehicle or money for you for your well-being, whatever it may be. He's going to give us unusual instructions, but when we're faithful to follow him, he's faithful to bless us for our obedience. And so they test our faith, because we have to go out on faith and lead out in faith, to trust that God will get us through what he has set us to. So, and he's going to do this here in verses 15 through 19, and ensure Israel's victory. Early on the seventh day, they started at dawn and marched around the city 7 times. So earlier in the week, it was 1 time a day. Now it is 7 times in the same way. 7 is a number that appears prominently in Joshua 6, but all over the Bible, it is a symbol of God's perfection. There are 7 days. On the seventh day, God rested. We still use that model for our week today, thousands of years later. We see the number 7 involved in a lot of things. We see the number 3 as the number of completeness in a lot of things. And so numerology is all throughout the Bible with numbers that are significant. Excuse me. And so now he has told the people to go 7 times, demonstrate his perfection. That was the only day that they marched around the city 7 times. After the 7th time, the priests blew the ram's horns, and Joshua said to the troops, "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city, but the city and everything in it are set apart for the Lord for destruction. Only Rahab," remember, a couple weeks ago, Rahab rescued 2 spies and assured her own safety through her kindness to them and their kindness to her. Made them swear a promise, and they swore a promise to her, and also had her swear a promise that she would not betray them. But Rahab was promised her family to be spared and her own protection for during this attack. So only Rahab the prostitute and everyone with her in the house will live, because she hid the messengers we sent. But keep yourselves from the things set apart, or you will be set apart for destruction. If you take any of those things, you will set apart the camp of Israel. If you take these things, man, you are condemning the whole nation because of that disobedience, and make trouble for it. Disobedience would lead to judgment. For all the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron are dedicated to the Lord and must go into the Lord's treasury. So why did God set the treasures of Jericho apart for himself? These were to be for his glory, so that no other man or person in Israel could hoard that wealth. This was for the betterment of Israel, of course, but it was also for God to get the glory for this victory, so that no one could say, "I did all these things. I'm the one who captured all of these things." It was only the Lord who did. So that brings us to the walls coming down. Walls destroyed, verses 20 and 21. So the troops shouted, and the ram's horn sounded. When they heard the blast of the ram's horn, the troops gave a great shout, and the wall collapsed. The troops advanced into the city, each man straight ahead, and they captured the city. They completely destroyed everything. The total of destruction of Jericho demonstrated the Israelites' total obedience to God. Every man and woman, both young and old, every ox, sheep, and donkey, they destroyed everything. And you might ask, Brother Chris, that was so brutal. How could a good God do something like that? You have to remember that the people of Canaan at this time were wicked. The people of Canaan at this time were wicked. They were sinful, to the point that Paul later writes that God had given them over to their depravity. He doesn't write it specifically about Jericho, but he does write it about those in Sodom and Gomorrah previously. This land was wicked, and it was promised to the Israelites. And so these people had opportunity. They had heard about God, they had heard about the Israelites, they knew that they were coming, and yet they still did not recognize God as the one true and living God, Lord over Israel, Lord of heaven and earth, alive in the earth, as Rahab confessed a couple weeks ago. And so God gave them over to the Israelites for destruction, or rather, they were set apart for destruction for the Lord because of their blaspheming, because of their wickedness. Not only, excuse me, is this a demonstration of God's faithfulness to Israel, This is a demonstration of God's judgment on sinful nations in the Old Testament. And yes, it is brutal. And yes, we hate thinking about innocents dying. But what this would do is fulfill God's promise to the Israelites that they would be that they would be able to take the promised land that he had assured them of, and he was also making his name great in this land so that others could come to know him. And we do see others, it's rare that it happens, but we do see others who are not members of the nation of Israel become members of the nation of Israel because of how strong the Lord is. So what potential victory is God asking you to trust him to provide? What are the things in your life right now that you are battling against that God is just asking you to trust him in that battle? I would urge you to trust him. I would urge you to follow him in faith as the Israelites did here. So then finally, the promise is kept. Verses 22 through 25. Joshua said to the two men who had scouted the land, "Go to the prostitute's house and bring the woman out of there and all who were with her, just as you swore to her." So the young men who had scouted went in and brought out Rahab and her father, mother, brothers, and all who belonged with her. They brought out her whole family and settled them outside the camp of Israel. So they were Gentiles. They had to remain outside the camp for a time. However, if you read the genealogy of Jesus in the book of Matthew, you will find Rahab's name. She becomes a member of the family of Israel and is one of the maternal figures of Jesus generations and generations ago. Verse 24, they burned the city and everything in it, but they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and iron into the treasury of the Lord's house. However, Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute, her father's family, and all who belonged to her, because she hid the messengers Joshua had sent to spy on Jericho, and she still lives in Israel today. So what victories does God promise his people today? He promises us victory over sin and death through his son, Jesus. That is the primary victory. He also promises us that we will never, as Christians, though we may taste an earthly death, we will never taste a spiritual death. We will be secured and we will have victory over this life, over sickness, over disease, over poverty, over over our own sin. God can win those victories through the blood of his son Jesus. That is what the promise that we should trust in today. I would say for most of us, at least at Emory Baptist Church, we're not being called to go and march around cities for their destruction. We're not being called to go and fight holy wars overseas or in another nation. We are being called to live as Jesus lived and to fight against the flesh, fight against, well, spiritual battles that are all around us, faithful to God and to be repentant of our own sins. And God promises us victory in those things through the blood of the Lamb. So thank you for being with me today. I look forward to worshiping with you